I always wished I could be a detective, yeah, but I'm very conspicuous, so I can't really make it.
Hii kazi Lupita inakuanga kazi ngumu kwa ule ajui.
If we were born together, why does she look different and I look different?
Ikifika SaharaTV itakuwa imekamilika.
Ooh, the issues. They laugh at you. The name callings.
Yellow man, yellow man, yellow man.
The stares.
I think I also see beauty in albinism. I don't know whether others do it, but I see it, and I'm so proud of it.
Ah, different.
It is simply a skin condition. That's it.
So we're here today to talk about Lupita Nyong'o's film, In My Genes, and the state of Kenyan filmmaking, or filmmaking in Kenya. And I guess we should start off by asking about the state of filmmaking in Kenya. Maybe by beginning by telling how you came to make this film and who you worked with in Kenya.
Okay. Well, I began making this film in 2006. It was my final thesis project at Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts. So yeah, it began as a school project, and I went back home in August of 2006 and was there for 8 months working on the film. And yeah, I mean, when I got there, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just wanted to make a documentary. The subject matter, I wasn't sure. And how it came to be about albinism was because my friend who's in the film, CK, she lived across from me for 10 years, and I never knew and I never understood her condition. And when I got back, my mother had just been to the first Albinism Society of Kenya meeting, and she was raving on about everything she'd learned about albinism, and I was shocked and quite embarrassed that I called CK even an acquaintance or a friend, and I didn't know about her condition. So it dawned on me that this could be a very good project for me to work on, and for me to learn something and to teach other people as well.
What kind of insight do you get as a Kenyan filmmaker to your subjects that that, however skilled, a non-Kenyan filmmaker doesn't necessarily have?
Well, okay, that was something when I went in that I really, really wanted to achieve. I wanted to achieve honesty and just truth, you know, and it was the first documentary film I made, so I was nervous throughout. I was a new terrain, and I think I was very one person, CK, said, yeah, you seemed a little bit, you know, really soft. And I think that it's the nature of it being my first documentary, and I wanted to really, I didn't want the camera to abuse people. And so it was really important to me to gain the trust of the people I was going to be working with, and for it to come from a genuine place. Me being an outsider, I'm nowhere near a person with albinism, and to be aware of that and to go into spaces with people with albinism, not apologizing for not being a person with albinism, but also not being presumptuous. But I think also in Kenya and in Africa, a lot of the documentaries are journalistic, and then when it comes to that, when it's got a voiceover and, you know, an outsider speaking in on the subject, it's hard to get that intimacy. In this documentary, there's no narration, and that was again an intentional thing. I didn't want to be some sort of lord over the subject. I mean, obviously it's subjective because I edited it, you know, so my voice is still being heard, but I wanted it to be their story from their mouths.
Yes, question.
Sure, question. What I thought was interesting was their construction of their identity, that racialization, their racialization of being black was discussed more than perhaps their ethnic identity. So you have a variety of ethnic groups that live in Kenya. And so in terms of feeling a sense of community, I heard them sort of stressing more of or grappling with, what does it mean to be black? But I was actually curious, what does it mean to be Kikuyu, or what does it mean to be Luo, or how their ethnic communities look at them. Do they look at them as not being part of their ethnic identity? I understand about the relationship between sort of their colorization, right? But what about this other sort of layering of their identity?
That's a very good question. And obviously, this is a construction of my editing, right? They definitely did speak about, I did ask some questions that didn't make it to the film, about their relationship with their tribe. And some of them commented that people with albinism are the luckiest group of people in the world, because they can stand outside of their tribe, as in, especially in Kenya, where there's a lot of tribalism. A person with albinism can go unnoticed as whatever tribe, because they all look the same. And one of the guys, the eldest person in my film, Benedict Kinyua, he feels very passionate about that strength in people with albinism, the fact that they don't have to necessarily ascribe to tribe, and they can be free of that when it comes to being identified and having to identify with a certain thing. They're fortunate in a way to be people with albinism, and they can teach other people in Kenya a whole lot about being tribalism free, and what does it mean to be of a certain tribe? What does that mean? Just in the same way, what does it mean to be black? We have all these cultures and traditions, yes, but at the end of the day, we're all human, and that should be the most important thing.
You alluded to this a little bit in the film, but there was a part where one of the girls, I think it was Casey, who said CK. I'm sorry, it's other way around. She said something about how I actually kind of get special treatment because I look white. For the most part, they do identify with blackness, but I'm wondering, with the black-white divide, how prevalent that is for them to say, well, I'm passing as white, or, and the fact that they recognize that they get preferential treatment, in an all-black society. Was there in your film instances where you felt like Kenyans as black people almost were afraid of their own blackness, or envious of albino whiteness? I don't know if that makes any sense or if it's relevant at all.
Well, I think, that's a very, my film does not really go in depth with the whole black whiteness. I think everywhere in the world there's some sort of envy, or there's still some sort of reverence of white skin, unfortunately. So in Kenya is no exception. We do have white people, but not nearly, definitely predominantly black, and we have a very large Asian community, Indian community. But there is still that reverence, and it comes from, colonial times where white people they had everything, and so and white people bring in the money today in tourism, so there's still that reverence of white skin meaning success and so on. So when these people talk about being treated special, it's like when you go to a restaurant and the waiter comes to serve you first because you're white, you're probably gonna leave a bigger tip, that sort of thing. So I don't think.
Do you think that anyone in Kenya mistakes a albino Kenyan for a European?
Yes.
Really?
Oh yes, definitely. Sure. I've seen it. I've been.
You've seen it happen, okay.
Yeah, and they're referred to.
In Nairobi?
Yeah, like when I'm hanging out with someone with albinism, and they're referred to as Mzungu as
okay.
well.
Right.
That's Mzungu means white person. It's the term for white person in Swahili, and that's what they're referred to as. So if they're wearing a hat and they can pass for white, or two Kenyans. I mean, I know a person with albinism when I see one in Kenya, but for the untrained eye, someone who doesn't see white people every day, and someone who does not know that albinism exists, they come across as white. In fact, one of the myths or the ignorant beliefs is that people with albinism are born of affairs with white men. So a lot of women get shunned away from their families. They get banished because the man of the house believes that she's been having an affair with a white man.
Well, I was, and to the filmmaker, what is so beautiful about it, you were never intrusive. And what is remarkable is that this is not a picture about disability. And one would think it would be, but it isn't. It is larger than that, and I think you said that others have said it's about the human condition. That was what I took away from it, a sense that I was listening to real human beings talking about real feelings and being honest about it. And somehow or another, their disability, because I guess we think of it as a disability, and that thing brings up a whole other question as to what is ability and what is disability.
Yes, and in the film about the point about disability or ability, that's one of the, and in a part of the film they talk about that, whether they feel that they have a disability or not. And it's very interesting, and it's something that is being debated in Kenya now with the Albinism Society of Kenya that has formed and the Albinism Foundation of East Africa, where some of them want to be identified as having a disability and others do not, because the condition of albinism, what it is it's little or no pigment in the skin, which affects your vision. You need melanin in your eyes to sieve light. And without that melanin, they have trouble sieving light, and that's why they have astigmatism, and and also melanin affects the connection of the eyes to the brain, and so they have astigmatism and they have trouble seeing in bright light. So in Kenya, they are grouped with the blind or the visually impaired, and a lot of them go to special schools for the visually impaired. And some of them think that that's great because then they get sheltered from the real world and they can build their confidence. And you can see some of them are really confident. They're products of those schools. But then others, like CK, did not go to a special school, and she's just as confident. And some of them feel that, you know, being in a special school shields you from the real world and could really do you harm when you finally get there. And others feel that being in the real world you know, makes you get the, you know, the strength you need to fight the stigma and all that, or not. You know, it depends. So it's a very interesting conversation to have with people with albinism, but with everybody with disabilities. What is a disability? You know, I don't have the answer. I think it's a rich conversation.
Over this past week, I was in a bookstore, a small bookstore in New Jersey, and there was like a guide to little-known places in New Jersey. And there used to be an albino village in New Jersey, and you had to go on through a bridge, and there was a sign that said Albino Village, something like that. And I guess it was like people with, what do you call it when your limbs fall off?
Leprosy?
Leprosy. Yeah, they were isolated like that, you know, living in this village. You know, we have this movement now that tries to address what we used to do, and I still do, I guess, to people who are differently abled. Do you see your film as being used in Kenya to be part of such a movement? You mentioned an organization that your mother attended a meeting. Is there a movement like that, and will your film and you possibly be part of that?
The biggest problem for people with albinism in Kenya right now is, of course, social exclusion and the lack of skin protection. They need sunscreen, and so we are working together with the film to create that social awareness and to put people with albinism, you know, in the forefront, in a good light, you know, and to get people to try and change the mentality, because like the best way to get people to change their understanding or their beliefs is to get them to see them in a different light. Especially right now, I would love this film to go around the whole of East Africa, because as we've heard in Tanzania and in Burundi and also in Kenya, people with albinism have been killed over the past like a year and a half, their body parts are believed to have some sort of magical powers, and the witch doctors are asking for body parts to have their clients get rich quick. It's very devastating, and it's appalling. So it's really important for me to have this film go around East Africa, just so that people can see that people with albinism are just people like everybody else.
One thing that always interests me, because I'm a semi-TV film person as well, is, you know, one, obviously in Africa we don't have as many resources to shoot things that would actually make it to the box office here. I guess I'm trying to gauge from you whether African film and filmmaking is making any headway whatsoever in sort of distributing itself internationally.
Wow. Well, first I must say that it's very sad that African film is most seen here and outside of Africa. It's very sad, but it's the truth. Especially, like, I didn't know about Ousmane Sembène until I went to my undergraduate program at Hampshire College, and I had no idea that there was this amazing industry, all these amazing, and like from way back when, Africans making films, and I was really shocked to learn that I could actually take an African cinema class. What was that? And watch all these great films by all these amazing Jibril Diop Mombeti and Ousmane Sembène, and yeah, so that's the sad truth, but it's also because that's where they get the money to make the films, and that's where they make the money back from distribution and stuff. But that said, I do think that the market is growing exponentially in Africa, and it was this trend, I think, was set with Nollywood in Nigeria, when Nollywood just cut out all the unnecessaries and got down to just telling stories that people wanted to hear. You know, it's a very mass sort of production, but it's what people, and then all the Nigerians gobbled it up, and now all of Africa is so hot on Nollywood, and here you find Nollywood in Harlem and Brooklyn and just about anywhere. You can make a low budget film, but as long as you have a good story to tell, and people will watch it, you know, will forgive the technical, you know,
the boom mic and
yeah, the boom, yeah, because if a story is compelling, and I think we can all agree, if the story is compelling, you forget anything else.
Hollywood in general has made movies about Africans, like I'll give you an example, like The Last King of Scotland. Just because I have issues with this myself about how Hollywood projects us in film and in television, and how you feel about that, and if you think that us telling our own stories is counter to that and giving a completely different face.
I read an article by the director. The director of The Last King of Scotland was being interviewed. The interviewer asked him, you know, why is this story told from a white man's perspective? You know, this is a story about an African president. Like, why do we have to hear it from this perspective? And what he said was something that I really took to heart, and I stopped complaining, was that this is the story that I'm going to tell because I'm not an African. Africans need to tell their own story. I wouldn't be able to do it any justice if I told it from their perspective. And I was like, yeah, that's true, you know? Like, we cannot blame... we can sit around and complain about how we're being portrayed in film, but at the end of the day, the only people who are going to change it are the people who care, and that's us. We need to find our own voice. Just be inspired to tell our own stories, because we have so much to tell.